The call came on a Tuesday morning, right when the winter sun was dragging itself over the rim of Canyon Ridge, like it didn't want to climb any higher. I was sitting in my truck outside the county hospital, staring at the billing statement for Mom's second surgery. 5 digits, a due date stamped in red, and a note at the bottom that said, "Payment expected within 30 days." I'd walked away from the park service after Gabe died during a night patrol, telling myself I'd never take another shift in that forest again. But grief is one thing. Debt is another. And hospital debt doesn't care about trauma. When my phone started buzzing with an unknown number, I almost ignored it. But something in me answered anyway. Milo? It's Chief Ranger Bennett. I didn't expect to hear that voice again. Not so soon. Not ever, maybe. "We're short-staffed," he said. "Winter patrols are backed up. I can put you on payroll this week." There was a pause, the kind that has weight. "You'd be on the midnight rotation. Starting Friday." My stomach tightened. Midnight rotation meant patrols through the North Corridor. The same route Gabe died on. The same place the park report danced around with phrases like environmental factors and weather interference, even though the weather had been clear the night he vanished from radio contact. I wanted to say no. The words sat on the tip of my tongue, ready to save me, but my fingers tightened around the hospital bill until the paper bent. One breath, one choice. "Yeah," I said. "I'll take it." Driving back into Canyon Ridge felt like returning to the scene of a crime you didn't commit but still felt guilty about. The wooden welcome sign was leaning at a slight angle, the paint peeling just as I remembered. The trees along the road felt taller than before, crowding the sky, listening. The ranger station looked the same from the outside, but the air felt different, as if the ground itself hadn't forgotten what happened to Gabe. Bennett met me at the station door. He looked older. Winter had carved deep lines into his face, and his uniform seemed to hang a little heavier on him. He shook my hand with a grip that was both too firm and not firm enough. "Good to have you back, Milo," he said, though his eyes said he wasn't sure. Inside, everything felt colder than it should have. The heater rattled like it was dying. Desks were stacked with unfinished incident reports, and the bulletin board was cluttered with missing person flyers that made the room feel crowded, even when no one else was there. Bennett led me into his office and closed the door. He didn't sit. "You'll be patrolling the North Corridor on your night shifts," he said. "And before you go out, you need to look at this." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of yellowed paper, the creases worn like it had been opened and closed 100 times. Across the top, in thick black ink, someone had written "Unofficial Protocol, do not file." "These aren't guidelines," Bennett said. "They're rules. Follow them exactly." I unfolded the paper. 3 lines. Handwritten. Uneven. 1. Do not stop at mile marker 19. 2. Do not speak to anyone standing on the roadside after 10 a.m. 3. If you see red lights between the trees, do not look directly at them. I stared at him. "This is a joke." "No," Bennett said, voice flat. "It isn't." My pulse thudded. "This is superstition. It's survival," he answered. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We've lost 3 rangers in that corridor the past 7 years. 2 were labeled accidents. The 3rd was Gabe." I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. "I know what the report said." He shook his head. "You know the public report." He slid a small metal key across the desk. "Locker 18. Your friend's bodycam files are inside. Whether you watch them is up to you. But follow the rules. Every ranger who does makes it home. Every ranger who doesn't." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I stepped out into the service yard with the rules in one hand and the key in the other. A cold wind cut through my jacket, even though the sun hadn't fully set. The treeline looked darker than usual, the branches leaning like they were listening. Something about the silence felt wrong. Like the forest had been waiting. My patrol SUV was parked where it always had been, Bay 3. Same dent on the bumper. Same crack in the right mirror. But as I opened the driver's door, I felt it immediately. The seat was cold. Not winter cold. Not idle vehicle cold. Just wrong. Like someone had been sitting there before me. Or like the seat remembered someone else. I shook the feeling off and climbed inside. The engine coughed twice before rumbling awake. The radio flickered alive with static. I checked my gear: flashlight, flare gun, thermal blanket, first aid kit, radio batteries. Everything was there. Everything I could trust. The dashboard clock read 4:17 p.m. 8 hours until my first night back on patrol. 8 hours until I'd be driving into the same darkness that swallowed Gabe whole. I rested my head on the steering wheel and let out a shaky breath. Then the radio cracked sharply. A burst of static, then a voice broke through, warped, thin, but unmistakable. Milo. My heart stopped. Another burst of static. Milo, don't take the North Corridor. Don't. I grabbed the radio, fingers trembling. Who is this? The voice came again, frantic, fading in and out. Mile marker, don't stop, they see you. Static swallowed the rest. And even though every logical part of me said it was interference, or a glitch, or someone messing with the channel, I knew that voice. I knew exactly who it belonged to. Gabe. Gabe, who had been dead for 6 months. The garage went silent. The rules trembled in my hands. And as the last echo of static faded, a single truth hit me harder than anything Bennett had said. Whatever killed Gabe wasn't finished. And now, it knew I was back. My first night back on patrol began the way all bad nights do: quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels staged. I left the station at 11:58 p.m., the engine humming under me as I rolled out toward the North Corridor. Snow drifted across the pavement in thin sheets. The treeline swallowed the headlights like it had been waiting to close in again. By 12:30, I had settled into the monotony of the route, trying to steady my breathing, reminding myself that it was just another shift. Trees, road, darkness. Things I'd seen 1,000 times. Things I used to trust. But the rule sheet on the passenger seat kept pulling my eyes toward it. As if the ink itself was whispering. I reached for the GPS a little before mile marker 12. The screen glitched. Once, then again. Then the map spun violently like someone was flicking it with a finger. The icon marking my SUV jumped from one side of the screen to the other. According to the display, I was facing north. Then east. Then planted in the middle of a canyon I knew was 20 miles away. Great, I muttered. Not tonight. I tapped the unit. It vibrated, flickered, and then displayed something I'd never seen before: recalculating, recalculating, recalculating. The word repeated so fast it blurred. I turned it off. That's when I saw him. A figure standing dead center in the road, illuminated by the high beams. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a torn flannel jacket. His hair was plastered to his forehead as if soaked, his jeans shredded along one thigh. No gloves, no backpack, no flashlight. Just standing there, staring at me. I slammed on the brakes, tires skidding across the frost. The SUV fishtailed before grinding to a stop 15 feet from him. My heart hammered so hard it drowned out the engine. What the hell? I reached for the spotlight mounted to the door and angled it toward him. His face came into focus. I recognized it. Not personally, but from a file. Missing person 1998. Name Daniel Harker, age 32. Last seen hitchhiking along the North Corridor during a storm. Recovered items none. Body never found. The photo on the file showed a younger, cleaner man, but the bone structure, the jawline, the scar on the left eyebrow. It was him, or someone wearing his face. He lifted a hand slowly, palm out, thumb tucked in, the universal sign for need a ride. Rule #2 echoed in my skull, like someone whispering inside the truck, do not speak to anyone standing on the roadside. After 10 a.m., I checked the dashboard clock with fingers that didn't feel like mine. 13 a.m. Milo. A voice broke through the radio, the same voice from the garage, warped, stretched thin. Milo. Don't stop, you know where mile marker 19 leads. My stomach flipped. Gabe. Or whatever was imitating him. The man in the road took a step toward the SUV. I threw the vehicle into gear and hit the gas. The tires churned through ice, and the SUV lunged forward. The man didn't move until the last possible second, stepping out of the way with unnatural precision, no flinch, no stumble, like he was waiting for the exact instant before letting me pass. As the SUV roared by, I glanced in the side mirror. He wasn't there. Not on the road. Not on the shoulder. Not anywhere. He had simply stopped existing. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I forced my eyes forward, fingers white-knuckled around the wheel. I didn't stop. Not for a second. Because everything in me knew that if I did, something would reach the vehicle before I could get moving again. At 1:25 a.m. near mile marker 17, the body cam on my chest beeped once, sharply. Recording. I hadn't touched it. Not now, I whispered. But the forest had other plans. The mic picked up something faint at first. Wind? No. Not wind. Rhythmic. Singular. A soft, high-pitched voice carried through the speakers, laced with static. Me I Luu. A child's voice. Breathy. Close. Too close. I froze. The voice came again, drifting through the bodycam feed like breath on glass. Milo, I found you. Children didn't come out here. No kids had gone missing in Canyon Ridge in over 20 years. And yet the voice sounded young, maybe 6, maybe 7. Not pleading. Not emotional. Just knowing. My finger hovered over the power button. Before I could press it, the voice changed sharper, like it moved closer to the mic. Look at me. I slammed my palm over the camera. No, I said, voice shaking. Not happening. The audio distorted, twisting into a screech like something scraping metal. Then silence. I didn't breathe again until the road curved and the marker sign appeared, mile 19. The number glowed under the headlights like it had been freshly painted. My hands tightened on the wheel. Rule #1, do not stop at mile marker 19. As I passed it, the radio came alive a third time, violent static. Then Gabe's voice cracking through like someone dragging him across 2 frequencies at once. Milo, don't slow down, don't look, don't. The broadcast cut so suddenly that the silence felt louder than the noise. I drove. Faster. Past 19. Past 20. Past everything my instincts told me to avoid. I didn't stop until I saw the faint glow of the ranger station porch light through the trees. When I finally parked, my legs wouldn't move. My hands wouldn't open. The bodycam was still recording, the red dot blinking, like a tiny heartbeat against my chest. I sat in the SUV for a long time, engine idling, breath fogging the windshield, trying to convince myself that I hadn't imagined any of it. But I knew better. I'd seen the man in the road. I'd heard the child. I'd listened to Gabe's voice 6 months after he died. And for the first time, I understood something with absolute clarity. The unofficial rules weren't superstition. They were survival instructions. And tonight, I had only barely survived. The call came in at 2:14 a.m., 20 minutes after I made it back to the station. I was still trying to steady my hands with a cup of burnt coffee when the emergency line crackled to life. Unit 4, dispatch. Alarm triggered at Lost Creek cabin. I froze. Lost Creek wasn't on my route. It wasn't on anybody's route. The place had been condemned 3 years ago after a mudslide nearly took out the western foundation. Rangers weren't supposed to go near it. Visitors didn't even know it existed. Dispatch, I said slowly. Lost Creek is restricted. No one's assigned there. Static. A pause. Then, alarm still active. Manual breach. Respond immediately. I stared at the radio as if it might explain itself. No one should be out there. The alarm system was offline. Disconnected from the grid years ago. So how the hell was it sending signals now? I grabbed my keys before I could talk myself out of it. The drive up the old logging road was narrower than I remembered. Branches scraped the SUV like fingernails raking along metal. The deeper I went, the more the headlights seemed to shrink, swallowed by the pines pressing in. At the top of the ridge, Lost Creek cabin appeared dark, crooked, slumped against the slope like something had pushed it from behind. The front door hung open. Not broken. Not kicked in. Just gently swaying, as if someone had slipped inside moments ago. I stepped out, boot crunching into the frost. The cold hit like something alive. Body cam on. The porch steps groaned as I climbed them, the wood soft beneath the ice. Inside, the cabin smelled of wet earth and old timber. My flashlight beam cut across the room. Tables overturned. Chair split in two. Dust dancing in the cold air like it had just been disturbed. Then I saw them. Footprints. A line of them across the cabin floor, muddy, irregular, heading toward the back door and out into the snow-covered trail. I followed the beam down, studying them more closely. Deep heel marks. Distinct toe imprints. Spacing consistent with a grown adult running. But they all shared one impossible detail: no shadows. My flashlight passed over them again and again. The prints were solid, pressed deep, but cast nothing. The floor around them darkened. The prints themselves stayed flat, untouched by shadow. I backed away instinctively. Something moved in the tree line behind the cabin. A voice drifted through the pines, thin, cracking, desperate. "Help, please, somebody help." I knew that voice. I shouldn't have known it. Her name was Amber Leeton, a hiker who vanished 6 years ago near Willow Gulch. The search had lasted 8 days. Not a trace ever turned up, but her 911 call had been played on loop during the operation. Her voice hoarse, frantic, begging. This voice was identical. "Amber?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The trees answered. "Milo, it's cold, please." My blood ran cold enough to hurt. I took one step toward the sound, and the body cam beeped sharply, the tone glitching like a corrupted file. The screen flickered. The cabin walls distorted in the feed, bending at angles that didn't exist. For half a second the image went black. Then a figure stood next to me. Gabe. Or the shape of him. Blurry around the edges. Uniform darkened with wet patches the autopsy had described. Face pale, eyes hollow, fixed straight ahead, as if he didn't see me standing there at all. I gasped and stumbled backward, hitting the wall so hard dust shook loose from the rafters. On the body cam, Gabe's apparition remained solid. In front of my eyes he wasn't there. "Gabe." My voice cracked. The projection turned its head toward the open doorway, like it was waiting for something to enter. Then the feed glitched again, the figure dissolving into static. My breath fogged in front of me, trembling. I didn't wait. I didn't investigate. I didn't call out to Amber's voice again. I sprinted out of that cabin and didn't stop until I slammed the SUV door shut. Back at the station, I went straight to the archives. If I'd learned anything tonight, it was this: the rules didn't come from nowhere. And whatever haunted mile marker 19 won with me. The cabinet marked incident personnel was locked, but the ranger chief kept the spare key in a coffee mug behind the first aid kit. A habit everyone knew about and pretended not to know. Gabe's file was thin. Too thin. I slid the papers out. Death location mile marker 19. I swallowed hard. Cause of death exposure and blunt force trauma. But the photos showed no impact bruising. Just frostbite and contusions inconsistent with a fall. Then I looked closer. 2 paragraphs had been blacked out with marker, but sloppily. You could still read the impressions through the page. Camera failure occurred prior to time of death. Body discovered 36 hours after reported last contact. Audio recovered from radio suggests. The rest was unreadable. I flipped to the final page. Final report filed by Station Chief Harold Dunn. Reviewed and revised by Kodiak Environmental Oversight Office. Revised, meaning the original version didn't match the one I was holding. Meaning someone had changed the details. Meaning somebody with authority wanted the truth buried. I closed the folder, pulse hammering in my ears. Because now I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. 1. Gabe hadn't died the way the report claimed. 2. Whatever killed him at mile marker 19 wasn't finished. It had spoken to me. It had followed me. It had shown itself through a camera that shouldn't be able to capture the dead. And the worst part, the unofficial rules weren't warnings. They were the only thing keeping us alive. Chief Dunn didn't even let me finish clocking out before he called me into his office. Door shut, blinds angled tight. Lights dim like he didn't want the station itself to hear what he was about to say. He dropped a thick, weather-warped folder onto his desk and slid it toward me, with the kind of look you give someone right before you tell them how little time they have left. "You went to Lost Creek Cabin," he said quietly. I didn't answer. My body still felt frozen from the night before. My hands kept wanting to shake at the memory of Gabe's figure standing where nothing should have been. Dunn took a breath and pulled out a stack of papers stapled together, edges yellowed from years of emergency use. "I wasn't planning on giving you these," he said. "Not yet. But after what happened last night, you need them." He placed the stack in front of me. 10 rules. Typed unevenly, reprinted so many times. The ink looked tired. "These aren't in the handbook," he said. "And you don't ever talk about them outside this room." I read the first one and felt a cold weight settle in my chest. "Do not drive past mile marker 19 after 1:17 a.m. Not 1:15. Not 1:20. 1:17 exactly." Dunn kept talking, low and steady. "There's a window between 1:17 and 1:23. We call it the split. Things move differently out there during those minutes." My eyes skimmed the next lines. "If someone waves for help, look only through your rearview mirror, never directly. Do not respond on radio if you hear the voice of someone deceased. If your headlights go out once, do not attempt to turn them back on. Stop the vehicle immediately. If you hear a child calling your name from the tree line, do not step off the trail, not for any reason." I felt my jaw lock. Every rule was built around something unnatural. Something the Park Service would rather die than acknowledge. But done wasn't done. "Keep reading," he said. Rule 6 was smudged but still readable. If you see red light in the trees, do not look at it directly, even with a camera. If your GPS directs you off the main road, ignore it. If you smell pine tar and there are no pine trees nearby, leave the area quickly. If the forest goes silent, do not speak. If you reach the crossing bridge and hear footsteps behind you, don't turn around. Ever. My breath caught on that last line. Something about its simplicity made it worse. Dunn rested both hands on the desk. His knuckles were white. "These rules aren't superstition," he said. "They're survival protocol. They kept Gabe alive for 3 years. He only died because he broke one." Silence settled between us, heavy and intimate, like a confession. I swallowed, throat tight. "Which one did he break?" Dunn didn't hesitate. "Rule 3, he said." He answered, a voice he shouldn't have. I felt every muscle in my body go rigid. Because I remembered the radio last night. I remembered hearing Gabe's voice say my name like he was sitting in the passenger seat, not dead on the side of a frozen road 6 months ago. And worse, I remembered answering him. My hands trembled so visibly Dunn noticed. "You okay, son?" I forced myself to nod even though I wasn't, not even close. Because the truth was suffocating last night, I had broken at least 2 rules. I had looked directly at something waving for help. I had spoken back to a voice that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. And Gabe, whatever version of him now, wandered the tree line, had appeared in my body cam as if he were standing inches from me. "Chief," I whispered, "what happens if you break more than one?" Dunn's face shifted, fear, pity, resignation all stacked together. "Then you pray," he said quietly. "And you stick to the rules from now on. Because once they notice you, the forest doesn't lose interest." I stared at the 10 rules in front of me. Black ink. Uneven font. Edges worn from use. These weren't guidelines. They were warnings. And I had already crossed the line they were meant to protect me from. By the 3rd night, the rules were no longer just ink on a page. They felt like a second heartbeat pulsing in the back of my skull, whispering, "Don't look, don't answer, don't stop." I kept the list folded in my jacket pocket, edges digging into my ribs every time I breathed, like it wanted to remind me that staying alive meant obeying them. The shift started quiet, too quiet for Canyon Ridge. No chatter on the radio. No hikers lost. No deer running across the road. Just a long stretch of black asphalt and trees packed so tightly, they looked like a solid wall. I kept the cruiser at 35, slower than usual. My nerves didn't let me go faster. Halfway through my patrol loop, the headlights flickered. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then they went dead. Every bulb, every auxiliary lamp, even the dash lights gone in an instant. And just like that, I'd hit Rule 4. If your headlights go out once, do not attempt to turn them back on. Stop and wait. But I was rolling blind through the thickest, darkest stretch of Park Road. "Come on, not now," I muttered, tapping the brake gently. The cruiser slowed, tires whispering over the gravel shoulder. Then the radio crackled to life. Not static breathing. Slow. Uneven. Familiar. Milo. My entire spine stiffened. Gabe's voice again. Closer than last time, like he was leaning right over the handset. "Don't get out of the car. You've got 40 seconds. Cold sweat broke across my back. 40 seconds until what? I whispered before I could stop myself. Rule 3 flashed through my mind like a switchblade. Do not respond if you hear a voice belonging to someone deceased. My stomach dropped. I'd broken it. Again. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. The forest went quiet in an unnatural way. No wind, no insects, no distant creaking of trees. A silence thick enough to feel. Then I saw them. At first, they looked like shadows. Then they stepped closer to the road. A line of people, 8, maybe 10, standing perfectly still in a row, on both sides of the asphalt, facing my cruiser. Their silhouettes were sharp against the moonlight. But their faces were just dark patches, like someone had erased every feature. None of them moved. None of them breathed. They simply watched. I forced myself to check the rearview mirror, heart pounding against my ribs. Nothing. The road behind me was empty, pitch black. But out the windshield those figures still stood there. Cold washed through me. If they weren't showing up in the mirror, they weren't people. My breathing sped up. The cruiser windows fogged slightly from the difference in temperature. Then something slammed onto the roof. Not like a rock. Not like a branch. Something heavy, as if an animal had dropped out of a tree. The metal dented inward above me, the roof groaning under the weight. Another hit. Then another. Claws, long ones, scraped across the metal, dragging toward my windshield. I didn't think. Didn't plan. Didn't breathe. I slammed my foot onto the gas. The cruiser fishtailed on gravel, then lurched onto pavement, picking up speed even though the headlights were still dead. The world went pitch black ahead of me, trees forming a tunnel of nothing. Branches slapped the sides of the car. Something thudded against the trunk. The figures on the road didn't chase, but I swear, I felt their eyes follow me as I tore past at 60, without seeing a damn thing. The roof shuddered again. Whatever was on top wasn't falling off, it was crawling forward, inching toward the hood. Gabe's voice whispered through the radio one last time, barely audible over the engine's scream of Milo. If you drive fast enough, they can't hold on. Don't stop. Not tonight. So I kept driving, hands locked on the wheel, eyes wide but blind, praying the road stayed straight, praying the thing on the roof didn't break through, praying I hadn't just broken every rule that kept me alive. I didn't know where mile marker 19 was anymore. I didn't know what was on top of the car. But I knew one thing, this wasn't just ghosts or hallucinations. Something in Canyon Ridge hunted anything that slowed down. And tonight, it had found me. I didn't sleep after the third night. I barely made it back to the station, engine smoking, roof dented like something big had ridden it halfway down the ridge. I filed no report. I didn't even try. I just sat in my cruiser in the back lot, with the engine still running, hands locked on the wheel, until sunrise finally softened the tree line. That's when Ellis found me. Ellis had been a ranger at Canyon Ridge longer than anyone else. Hair gray, beard tangled, uniform faded like it had been washed in fear, more than water. People said he'd survived 12 years of night patrols. I always thought that was just legend. He tapped on my window once. Not loud, almost gentle. "You want to get out of that car before the daylight shifts?" he said. Daylight shifts? I didn't even ask. I just stepped out, legs wobbling. He looked at the dents on the cruiser roof, then at my face. "Yeah," he said. "You've been marked." I opened my mouth to speak, but he lifted a hand, signaling me to follow him around the back of the maintenance shed, where the cameras didn't reach, and the radios always fuzzed out. "You think the rules are superstition?" Ellis asked, lighting a cigarette with fingers that shook just enough to betray him. "They're not." "What are they?" I asked. He took a long drag, exhaled slow. "Leftovers," he said. "From the 60s. From when the Department of Homeland Security thought this place was a perfect test site." "For what?" He flicked ash onto the dirt. Low-frequency resonance experiments. Early tech they thought could be used for communication, crowd control, weather manipulation. Things no one had names for yet. That didn't sound like Ranger talk or conspiracy theory talk. It sounded like someone who had seen things the government didn't put in writing. They built emitters deep in the ridge, Ellis continued. Ran them for 3 years until the readings went sideways. Sideways how? Ellis stared at the tree line at a specific point, like he knew something watched from there. They tore a seam, he said, made the boundary between realities thin. Not wide enough to fall through, but enough for things to bleed across. I felt cold spread through my arms. You're saying the things at mile marker 19 are what? Ghosts. He shook his head. Not ghosts. Echoes. Reflections. Resonant copies of every living thing that ever died inside that radius. He leaned closer. Like sound bouncing off canyon walls, except it's people. Moments. Final breaths. They replay themselves over and over, stuck in whatever moment killed them. I swallowed hard. So the things I saw, those figures on the road, were the last shapes they had before they died, Ellis finished. Some of them harmless, some not. And the voices. Recordings of panic, pain, confusion. And every time a ranger or hiker dies here, the echoes get stronger, clearer. My skin prickled. And Gabe? Ellis didn't answer. His eyes softened with something like regret. That boy lasted longer than most. But something out there finally learned his name. And once the forest knows your name, he crushed what remained of his cigarette into the dirt. It doesn't forget. A silence settled between us, heavier than any sound the forest could make. I finally managed to ask, why didn't the park shut this place down? Ellis huffed a laugh that had no humor in it. You think they didn't try? They closed it 3 times. Each time, more people went missing outside the gates than in. They learned the hard way, if you don't give the ridge something predictable to feed on, it hunts where it wants. My heart hammered. So the rules are containment, Ellis said flatly. They don't just keep us safe, they keep everything else from spilling out. He stepped closer. And that's why you need to listen carefully, Milo. This is the part the chief won't tell you until it's too late. I stared at him, breath held. If you ever hear your name whispered from the forest, especially if it sounds like someone you know. He swallowed, voice dropping to a rasp. That means they've chosen you. My chest tightened. Chosen me for what? Ellis looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. To join the echoes, he whispered. Or to bring in new ones. The wind shifted across the ridge, and for the first time since I returned to Canyon Ridge, I felt the forest listening. Ellis's words were still echoing in my skull, long after he left me standing alone behind the station. If you hear something in the woods call your name, it means they've already chosen you. Chosen me for what? He never said. But the way his eyes had hollowed out, I didn't need an explanation. By the time I walked back inside, the sun was sinking behind Canyon Ridge, turning the tree line into a jagged black cutout. My stomach twisted. That forest wasn't just scenery anymore. It felt like it was watching me walk across the parking lot. I went straight to the office computer and pulled up the resignation form. My hands were shaking so hard I kept hitting the wrong keys. I didn't care. I was done. No job was worth standing in a world where the dead talked, where memories walked around without shadows, where I could hear Gabe whispering through static, like he was trying to crawl back into this reality. I typed 3 lines and hit save. Before I could print it, my phone rang. Mom's hospital. I answered before the first full ring. The doctor spoke gently, The way you do when giving bad news to someone who already looks exhausted. Her lungs were failing faster than expected. The treatment wasn't responding. There was one last chance surgery. Then came the number. $38,000. Up front. Within days. My fingers went cold around the phone. I told him, I'll find it. He didn't say good luck. He didn't need to. I hung up and stared at the screen. My half-finished resignation letter blurred. I didn't have $38,000. I didn't have $3,800. I barely had enough for gas. I was still trying to breathe when I heard a quiet knock. Chief Dunn walked in. He looked at me the same way. He looked at Gabe's abandoned locker. The day after the accident, heavy, sad, resigned. I heard about your mother, he said softly. I'm sorry. I nodded, unable to speak. Dunn placed a thick envelope on the desk. There's an opportunity. One we don't offer often. I didn't open it right away. Something in my gut twisted. But when I finally slid the papers out, the first line felt like a punch hazard. Response assignment mile, marker 19. My heartbeat stumbled. Dunn continued, 10 consecutive night patrols. You complete them, you get 60 grand. No delays. No deductions. 60,000. Enough to save Mom's life. More than enough. Then I saw the fine print. Fatalities during duty are classified as occupational loss. No investigation. No compensation. No inquiry. My mouth went dry. So if I die out there, I whispered. Dunn didn't look away. Then your death stays here. Just like the others. Others. The word hit harder now that Ellis had told me everything. The missing. The bodies never found. The accidents that weren't accidents. The entities repeating their death memory like a broken film reel. I looked up at Dunn. Did you know? About the experiments. About the ridge being thin. He paused just long enough to give me my answer. Some things are above our pay grade, Milo. Some things are older than this station. My breath shook. He tapped the contract. It's your choice. But this solves your mother's problem. Before I could answer, someone stepped into the doorway. Ellis. His face was set like stone, but his voice carried a tremor I'd never heard from him before. Don't sign it. Dunn stiffened. Ellis. I'm saying it. Ellis looked straight at me. You survived 2 nights. The ridge knows you now. It marked you at the cabin. That's why you heard Gabe so clearly. That's why you saw his shadow. My chest tightened painfully. Ellis came closer. You think those rules keep us alive? No. They keep us alive long enough. Long enough to train the next guy. Long enough to stand between their world and ours. I swallowed. Gatekeepers. Ellis nodded slowly. That's all we are, and the ridge needs fresh ones. It takes one of us every cycle. That money, that contract, they're not paying you for risk. They're paying you to stand at the door. Dunn looked away. Ellis lowered his voice to a whisper meant only for me. They don't want Rangers to survive. They want Rangers to return. Something shifted outside the window, a flicker between the trees. Too tall to be a person. Too smooth to be an animal. My scalp tightened. I looked down at the contract. It felt like choosing which death hurt less. And for the first time since arriving at Canyon Ridge, I realized I wasn't deciding whether to go back out there. I was deciding whether I could live with myself if I didn't. And the ridge already felt closer. Waiting. Listening. Expecting. I signed the contract just before midnight. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like I was pressing my name onto something alive. The ink hadn't even dried before Dunn handed me a fresh key set and a single sealed envelope for after. He said. I didn't ask what that meant. By 1:10 a.m., I was already driving up Ridge Road. The forest looked wrong. Still. Too still. Not like a place where animals slept, but like a place where nothing living existed at all. The moon cut through the tree line in pale slashes, and every mile marker I passed made my chest tighten. When the GPS blinked out, I knew I was close. At exactly 1:17 a.m., the cruiser rolled to a stop beside the metal pole marked 19. A number scratched and dented like something had tried to claw it off the earth. That was when the rearview mirror fogged over from the inside. I wiped it with my thumb. My reflection didn't wipe with me. Then the headlights sputtered once, twice, and died completely. The forest swallowed the road. The radio crackled, thin like breath pushing through water. Then Gabe's voice filled the cruiser, clearer than ever. Milo listened to me. When you see them, you need to run. You need to drive no matter what. My heartbeat skidded. This was exactly what the rules warned about. Don't answer the dead. Don't acknowledge the echoes. Don't trust familiar voices. But this time I didn't want to survive the way they expected me to. Running only fed the ridge. Running only repeated the cycle. Running kept the door open for the next ranger. Maybe Ellis had been right. Maybe I'd already been chosen. But I could decide how. Slowly, I turned off the radio. Silence pressed in, heavy and full of breath. I opened the door. Cold air poured in like the forest was exhaling. The ground felt softer than dirt, should like walking on something that remembered footsteps. Every rule screamed at me to stay inside. To not step out. To not look. To not listen. I broke all of them in one motion. My boots hit the pavement. From the tree line came the first voice. A woman whispering my name. Milo, help. Her tone fractured, looping over itself like shattered audio tape. Then a second voice joined her. A child. Then a man. Then dozens blurring together, all calling my name, overlapping, rising like a tide. It didn't sound like a haunting. It sounded like a chorus, a warning, or a hunger. I raised my body cam, the red recording light blinking back at me. My breath came out white. "This is Ranger Milo Carter," I said. My voice steady only because nothing else in me was. "If anyone ever finds this footage, don't follow the rules. Don't come to Canyon Ridge at all." The forest answered with a groan, deep enough to shake dust off the cruiser. Something moved behind the trees. Not stepping. Not walking. Just appearing, like it slid between one frame of reality and the next. A shape as tall as a semi-truck stepped into the road. Limbs too long, face too smooth, body flickering like bad reception. Its shadow stretched the wrong way, bending toward me, even though its body leaned back toward the forest. The voices behind it rose into a single distorted wail. My flashlight beam trembled in my hand. Then it hit me not physically, but with a force like gravity shifting. My knees buckled. The camera tilted. The world twisted sideways. The last thing the footage captured was the beam of my flashlight dropping into the dirt, rolling until it faced the forest floor. Boots. Branches. A shriek too guttural to belong to a throat. And then, nothing. No body. No scream. Just static. Just the forest resetting. When the sun rose, the cruiser sat empty at mile marker 19, driver door wide open, keys still in the ignition. The body cam lay beside the tire, its lens cracked clean down the middle. Back at the station, Chief Dunn unlocked the storage cabinet for new recruits. He reached into a drawer and placed a fresh sheet of laminated rules behind the glass. 10 old rules, 1 new 111. Never follow Ranger Milo's path. He closed the cabinet, turned the key twice, and walked away without looking back. Behind the glass, Rule 11's ink was still wet.